month, President Biden signed into law the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act, making lynching a federal hate crime. That is great news that it is also 400 years overdue. Now, why exactly did it take so long? I'll explain in a segment called How Did We Get Here? The Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act was signed into law on March 29th, 2022. It's definitely good news, but it does feel a little surprising that it just happened. It's like finding out we just passed a law saying you can't light a daycare on fire. Like, how is that not already the law? The Anti-Lynching Act actually passed the House by a vote of 422-3 and passed the Senate by unanimous consent. It sounds easy, so why did it take so long? The short answer, of course, is racism. The long answer is racism, but with more details. So let's take a look at why it took Congress over a century to pass an anti-lynching bill and why it still matters. To do that, we need to go back to the beginning of the last century, when it was totally normal to name your baby Herman, and people used to rock out to this. You think you can't twerk to that? You can twerk to that. In the year 1900, the first anti-lynching bill was presented to Congress by George Henry White, a representative from North Carolina. Now, you might not be able to tell, but for his day and age, this man was a fox. In 2022, he's a 3, but in 1900, he was an 11. Now, to set the scene, there had been unrest in White's district, which included Wilmington, North Carolina. Wilmington had a mostly black population and many black government officials. The black community there was filled with doctors and lawyers and people who owned prosperous businesses. And if you've ever seen this show before, I think you know where this is going. It's the same feeling you get when a white person is about to give their thoughts on the Will Smith-Chris Rock slap. It's gonna end poorly. Black families in Wilmington became successful, and their white neighbors were not having it. So white supremacist groups in the area published something they called the White Declaration of Independence, which, correct me if I'm wrong here, is just the Declaration of Independence? Anyway, their version said that white men had to be given black men's jobs in businesses, which is insane. Basically, the business community in Wilmington was a lot like the word bay, created by black people, but as soon as it got big, white people had to find a way to ruin it. And that's exactly what they did. A white mob stormed through the streets of Wilmington, shooting into the homes and schools of black residents. They violently seized control of the government and installed unelected white people to replace black officials. Mobs ravaged the entire city, lynching anywhere from dozens to hundreds of black residents. That is the environment in which George Henry White introduced the first anti-lynching bill to Congress, as a black man who had just watched his constituents being lynched in the streets. And yet, the bill never made it out of committee. Congress refused to even have the conversation. When he left Congress a few years later, George Henry White would be the last black person in Congress for almost 3 decades. Because you know the old saying, once you go black, white people throw a huge tantrum and don't elect another black person for an entire generation. Might not be catchy, but it's true. Now, that was just the first try. After the bill's failure, it took 20 years before another anti-lynching bill was introduced into Congress. This time, it took the work of the NAACP and a Missouri representative named Leonidas Dyer. Dyer also had seen attacks on his black constituents, including the East St. Louis race riots, in which 38 African-American men, women, and children were murdered by a white mob. Dyer's bill did actually make it out of committee and even passed in the House in 1922, but it was stalled by racists in Congress who claimed that the anti-lynching bill was, and I swear this is true, an act of legislative mob violence, which is insane. That's not just the pot calling the kettle black, it's the pot lynching the kettle and then complaining about pan-on-pan violence. Unfortunately, the stories go on like this for the next century. Anti-lynching bills emerged every decade or two, like cicadas or revivals of Annie. And just like Annie, there were a lot of white guys embarrassing themselves by being on the wrong side of history. Mr. Warbucks, you are an aging bald guy constantly hitting on your much younger assistant. You are a cliche and a walking sexual harassment lawsuit. Find a woman who isn't your employee and stop asking everybody to call you daddy, you freaking creep. The fact fact is, almost 200 anti-lynching bills were introduced in the first half of the 20th century. 7 presidents petitioned Congress to end lynching. Sometimes the bills would actually pass the House, but they always got blocked by the Senate. And by the way, you know how I know all that? Because it's from the text of a resolution the Senate passed in 2005 apologizing for the fact that they never passed an anti-lynching bill. That's right, they passed a resolution apologizing for not passing an anti-lynching bill, but they still didn't pass an anti-lynching bill. That's nuts, man. It's like lifeguards apologizing to someone for all the shark attacks while the shark is still chewing off their leg. Get your priorities straight. Now, you've probably noticed that I haven't really gotten into the details of lynching in this piece. Well, that's because once you talk about exactly what happened, it's hard to make jokes. But the details matter. More than 4,000 people were lynched in the United States between 1882 and 1968. And 99% of perpetrators escaped state or local punishment. The Equal Justice Initiative describes some of these lynchings as carnival-like events where vendors sold food, photographers printed postcards, and victims' clothing and body parts were given out as souvenirs. Lynching has basically been an open wound for our country. Yes, it hurts to deal with it, but it will get so much worse if we don't. The NAACP defines lynching as the public killing of an individual who has not received any due process. So yeah, that includes our ancestors who were hanged from trees, but it also includes modern-day Black people who were murdered while they were taking out their wallet, wearing a hoodie, or jogging in their neighborhood, or just minding their own dang business. The Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act was signed into law last month. All it took was 200 attempts, 122 years, and thousands upon thousands of lynchings. I'm glad it finally got passed, but we have to remember exactly how we got here.